Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you may be, anywhere across the world. Thanks so much for joining us here live again today for Serverless Office Hours, streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, Serverless Land YouTube, and LinkedIn Live. My name's Julian Wood. I am a developer advocate for Serverless at AWS, and super duper happy to welcome back one of our experts on the same team as me, the one, the only Dave Boyne, who is Mr. Event-Driven Architectures, Mr. Event-Driven Everythings. Dave, how are you today?
Great, yeah. Thanks for having me, Julian. Last second, good to jump in. But yeah, I'm great. Good. Hopefully, showcase some serverless snippet stuff today.
Excellent. Well, yeah, that's going to be coming up in a few minutes. So stick with us. Dave's going to be talking about how you can reuse existing bits of code and bits and pieces to turbocharge your serverless development. But yeah, just looking back over the last sort of week of AWS serverless. Last week was SAM Accelerate and Nested Stacks, a really good demo which Jeff Marchenko did with Brian and Eric. Yeah, it just makes it so much easier to be able to separate your CloudFormation stacks, have nested stacks, and SAM Accelerate allows you to do testing in the cloud, sync up your code changes. They get synced up immediately to your Lambda functions, your API gateways, and your step function state machines, just with a save. So that is a super useful SAM Accelerate functionality with nested stacks. Then what's new in AWS Serverless? Well, some Lambda stuff that's been coming out recently. Second one on the list is Graviton 2. So that's our ARM-based processor. Save a chunk of money, get faster processing in your Lambda function. Sounds like a great idea. And that's now available in 12 additional regions. So if you were blocked from using Lambda on Graviton before, now you can hopefully be unblocked. Also, a really cool feature that I love is the event filtering for Lambda. So this is when you are polling from event sources, things like MSK, which is managed streaming for Kafka, self-managed Kafka, and then ActiveMQ or RabbitMQ. One of the big superpowers of Lambda, I think, is where Lambda runs this polling fleet on your behalf and is able to poll from all these event sources, including SQS and DynamoDB and Kinesis. And the really cool thing now is this event filtering means the poller does the event filtering. Don't have to send stuff to a Lambda function that you're ultimately going to discard. So really useful functionality. Certainly give it a try. And the last for SQS, give them a shout. Server-side encryption with SQS managed encryption keys. So yeah, just adding more security, which is always job zero here at AWS. Compute blog posts, not too many more ones recently because potentially there's a little conference coming up shortly and there may be some interesting announcements. But yeah, Marsha Bishaba on our teams, lifting and shifting a web app to AWS Serverless Part 1 and 2. Super useful if you are in the traditional web application sphere and want to move things to serverless. Some great tips. And of course, MemoryDB for Redis, you're wanting some big in-memory cache. How to use that with Java and Lambda. A really great blog post for that. Talked about the big show. AWS reInvent is coming up. It will be in Las Vegas, Nevada between the 28th of November and the 2nd of December. Dave and I will both be there with a whole cohort of thousands of people from AWS to be able to provide some breakout sessions, chalk talks, workshops, builder sessions, things. Serverless Espresso is coming to reInvent. It's really going to be there. Recordings are live, so if you aren't going to be there, you aren't going to completely miss out. But you know, if you are going to be there, first of all, on your top wish list is giving Eric Johnson a hug because he gets energy from that, and then anyone else from the team. So certainly there are still slots available to be able to register. So it would be a delight to see you there. But now, just switching over today, Dave, the Serverless Snippets collection. Tell us about what are Serverless Snippets?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. So serverless snippets are snippets of code that you kind of find around or you keep around on your computer, in your local environment, wherever it might be. And these are kind of things you just tend to copy and paste everywhere, right? And for example, if you want a CloudWatch log insight or you want a snippet of code that you've seen somewhere online, you kind of start Googling, how do I do this? And you come across some code eventually, be able to copy and paste it into your environment and crack on. For me, it's kind of super, as kind of engineer kind of background, I just find it super frustrating when I can't find the thing I'm looking for fast. So I kind of built this thing as an experiment, just to see if, people were interested in this kind of solution where we could share these snippets, right? These kind of, it might be AWS CLI commands, or could be CloudWatch queries, or it could be anything really, just small snippets of code. Can you quickly share them, index them, and find them? So I kind of explored that really. And what I
Excellent.
can
So
do,
I know on serverlessland.com, which I will post the link to shortly, we do already have serverless land patterns and we already have workflows. So just tell us about the difference between those.
yeah, that's right. Yes, I was going to go through it actually on my screen. Shall I show my screen now?
Certainly, let's do that.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to move this.
So while Dave's getting up his screen, I am just posting the links to the recent What's New in AWS Serverless Compute blog posts and the reInvent landing page. So I next up on the list while Dave is chatting, I will give you the Serverless Land snippets URL, and you can browse, paying attention to Dave in the background, obviously, but yeah, browse to your heart's content.
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of a high level really here. So we have serverlessland.com, and this is a website that our team actually run and kind of maintain. And I believe it's been here for probably a couple of years now, right, Julian?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
definitely over a year. So
Yeah. Yeah, so even before I joined AWS, and to be honest, I still use this quite often. To be fair, I think it's great. It's a great kind of place where you can kind of learn serverless stuff, see what's new. We can go click on this, see what's new and what's up and coming, or what has been released, which is great. But most useful for me, when before before I joined, and again still find this very useful, is exploring patterns. So these are kind of a way you can see integration patterns in AWS. And for example, if you're in a team and you want to understand how you can do S3 to Lambda, and there are hundreds of tutorials out there. Don't get me wrong, but I always start here. I always kind of look. I'm looking for S3 down this list. Click S3 here, and then maybe also click Lambda if I can find it here. Now I've got all these examples of all these patterns that people have kind of built and introduced. Now our team, we build these and add to this, but also the open source community add to this, and we have literally new patterns every day that we merge, which is great. And again, all this is open source. You can see this. Now the best thing about this is you can kind of filter by your language and your type. And you can kind of dive into them, right? So I'm a Node developer. So here, S3 to Lambda, that's just a basic example. So if we click a view pattern, and then when we click view pattern, we can actually follow the instructions here and install it and get it on our machines, which is great. If I go down, this is using CDK. As you can see, I can actually see how other people are using CDK to kind of build these constructs and build these integration kind of patterns, which is great. And then what I can do from here, what I tend to do, I still do this, honestly, is I kind of dive a bit deeper. So I go to the repo here and kind of look about how to do this. Now, the biggest, obviously, it's probably old news now, but if you press dot on here, which I do all the time, we can get the editor up, right, in GitHub. And what I tend to do here is just explore in more detail.
Sorry, Dave, just you sort of flippantly went over that. You clicked dot on where and what editor came up? What is this sorcery and magic that you've uncovered in GitHub?
Yeah, sorry. So there's a feature they kind of released last year, where if you go to any GitHub repo and press full stop, it will load the environment for you. So it will load a VS Code instance in the browser, and then you can start using this, exploring this, clicking into files, searching for stuff. Everything you're used to in VS Code is now in this browser. I'm not sure why this is taking so long to load. I might have to come back to that. But the idea is it kind of loads and you can see the code and dive in and explore. And to be honest, I do this probably every other day at the moment, still, right? Even if I'm on the team, because I just like to explore new patterns and how to do things. And it's just a great way to start, not from scratch, but start exploring stuff, start exploring patterns. So patterns definitely on Serverless Land is our most popular part of the website, which is great. And we can kind of see users using this and customers using this all the time. Now, in addition to patterns, what happened was we added workflows not too long ago, actually, a few months ago, to extend patterns. And what workflows are mainly focused around AWS step functions. Now, with step functions, you can orchestrate your kind of workflows using state machines, for those who are not aware. So it's a really good way of managing and orchestrating code and logic in this kind of way that makes sense, right? So think about the alternative. The alternative is we have, and I've been there in the past, is you have a massive Node.js application, or you have a massive application doing lots of things. You talk to your business owner and get requirements or whatever else, and you start coding that in this kind of, in code, right? In Node, in Python, whatever that might be. And then that kind of code grows over time, and 6 months later, people leave, people come, you move on to a new project, and the code becomes super legacy, and it becomes super hard to understand and really dive in and kind of pick away at this thing, especially when you have like product owners or business analysts sat with you and kind of talking about how does this particular claims process work? How does this particular thing work? Now with step functions, it's brilliant because it's actually visually shows you how this orchestration piece works. So an example here, I'm just hovering over these for examples, but we can see this is an automated policy orchestrator. Okay, so what does that do? And I've not, this is probably like the second time I've ever seen this, but I can look through this on this stream and say, we're modifying some state at the top, then we validate some policy, and then based on the validation, we're choosing 2 actions here. We either publish an SNS topic here, or we kind of continue down and do some Lambda processing. So it's very cool way to visualize what is going on. Now, Workflow Collection is an open source collection of step functions, workflows, right? And you can come down here and just see all sorts of patterns that you might want to use in your organization. An example here is like human in the loop. Is it approved or not? So a great thing with step functions is you can, I'm not sure if this is using it, I think it might, which is like using await task tokens, which can, they can wait up to a year. So think about a claims process, like in the UK, for example, when I claim a life insurance policy, it's not instant. It doesn't happen overnight. It has to go through various different third parties. Now, if we had await task tokens in particular in this orchestration thing, we can do some interesting things. We can start the policy process, we can wait, and then pass that on to a third party. Third party can then do what they need to do, mainly a manual review or ring you up or check to see things, and then continue that process using task tokens. And this is kind of maybe what this human in the loop. We've got one here called emit and wait workflow, which is probably similar. But if you want to learn step functions, you want to dive into more and use these in your organization, this is a great place to come. Again, explore and learn how to use step functions. So if, for example, if we were interested in querying Athena, we'd kind of view this, and we can see there are some descriptions here and some instructions. We can also click on this and view the state machine image, but then we can click on this and also get access to the code itself and the template. And then when we come down here again, this was open source. This was committed by someone else. We can actually click on the GitHub repo for this workflow. And again, if we go in here, oh, my dog's just come in. If we go in here and press full stop again, hopefully this kind of brings us faster. Here we go. So now we actually have a whole environment where I'm looking at the workflow, right? I can see this is, this is actually something I was doing earlier. This is actually a serverless pattern, but you can kind of get the gist here is we can navigate these files, have a look around and kind of dive into things and just explore. I spend most of my time in this environment all the time on GitHub, just looking at how people are doing stuff. What can I take from this? What can I learn from this? And kind of apply it within your organization, within your AWS account.
Just to confirm, Dave, you're getting the gist from this, but these aren't GitHub gists. Just checking. No, I'm joking with you because that's a whole different part of GitHub, and I'm just tripping you over your words. But yeah, this is fantastic. I love the exploratory use case of it. I literally use whenever I'm building a demonstration or helping someone with a full-blown serverless application. Literally, serverless patterns or workflows is the way to go. And it's not as though I have to use the whole pattern or the whole workflow. There may just be an IAM policy or a little funky bit of SAM logic that, oh wow, that is awesome, and you can beg, borrow, and steal to your heart's content from all these different examples.
Exactly that. Yeah, I love it. I love it because I'm literally like, okay, I want to do DynamoDB, API gateway directly to Dynamo or whatever else, and you can just come in, explore, and just pick and choose and learn. So it's a great way. So this is workflow. So we released this. It's very popular again. We get a lot of traffic here, and most of the stuff here is also indexed by Google, which is great. So when people are searching for particular integration patterns or particular workflow patterns, you can kind of hopefully see these appear on Google search. Now get into snippets. So I kind of set the scene. So we get into the snippets part. So snippets is the latest section of serverless LAN. So kind of when I a few months after I joined the team, I was kind of like looking for things in particular like CloudWatch log insight queries or small snippets of code that I know that other people are doing. It's just I might have them locally somewhere stored in a Notion or whatever, and things like that. But I know there are other websites I've come across other blog posts before where they just have like lists and lists of these snippets, and you kind of think, well, I started to think, why can't we have these snippets open source and have other people commit to snippets? Why couldn't you have a collection of these things? This was more of an experiment than anything else. So I started hack around together a section on the website called Snippets Collection. And it originally started with just CloudWatch log insight queries. And personally, because I'm not using CloudWatch logs insights every day, I know there are particular queries that I want to use, but every kind of month or every 2-3 months, I kind of want them. I've got to kind of find them on the internet again and try and figure out how to use it.
Dave, do you mind just zooming in a little bit, just while you are, just for the people with funny eyes like me, I can see a little bit better. Yeah, and just to reiterate, I mean, CloudWatch Logs Insights, it's one of this awesome functionalities of being able to query across multiple log groups, able to look at, integration latency there, for example, the last 10 requests, people look at cold starts, people look at your init time, average latencies, 4x errors. I mean, it's so much. CloudWatch Logs Insights is so useful, but it's got its own query language, and after joining AWS, one of the very first GitHub repos I created to help out was a CloudWatch Logs Insights repo, which had a little bit of traffic, but I think this is much better.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly it, right? And also in the top right, I kind of add the icon on there, which is kind of what service is it kind of linked to? So exactly what you said, if you want to get the paths with the most access denied, and you can kind of just come here and explore these and kind of scroll down. Now with the CloudWatch Logs Insights, what I managed to do is, what I wanted to do is, I wonder if we could actually embed this within AWS console itself. And what I kind of realized is you can use the kind of query string in AWS console to pass in particular queries. So what you can do here is this will actually open up this query inside of my AWS account, which I'll show you now. And what it will do is kind of go to the region, and then I'll zoom in a bit here. You can see here we automatically get this CloudWatch log insight here. So then I can pick the function name to kind of run against, which I'm looking now at my notes to see which one it was. Okay. If I take this one, for example, and run a query here, we can see this should get the last 10 last 10 requests. Now there hasn't been 10, so we can kind of get the 4, but you kind of get the gist is you can use these CloudWatch insights one click and kind of, I guess, not deploy them, but see them in your AWS account to try and just help people experiment, play around, learn, and just use these snippets. So again, just another kind of user experience here I was playing around with to help people here. And then again, some instructions down here about how to manually add these into your account and things like that. If we go,
and also for CloudWatch Logs Insights queries, I believe you can save them, and you can also share them with other people. So that's also a useful thing once you have them in your own account, across your organization or with your best friend across the world. You can actually share those queries, which I think is super useful.
Yeah, definitely. Let me quickly pull something out. We had a community member, Lars,
Yeah, just while you're pulling it up, I do have some comments. And Cloud Surfer, thanks for joining us via YouTube. Can you please add Java? Of course, we'll add Java as soon as we have something. Obviously, that wouldn't be a CloudWatch Logs Insights, but I see you being extra keen and doing some browsing on the website, which is fantastic. So there are other little snippets which Dave will get into are within the code. And Cloud Surfer, also your second comment, maybe add Cloud Formation snippets. Well, that is the interesting thing, because I think that would be more suited to be under the Serverless Patterns, because that is integrating two separate resources, which is sort of a cloud formation-y infrastructure thing. Even though when you are building serverless applications, the sort of dividing line between your infrastructure and your application is a bit blurred, because in a serverless app, a lot of your infrastructure is your application. A queue or or something like that is part of your application, not just infrastructure. So I think the answer would be anything CloudFormation related in terms of building and sort of deploying a stack would be within the serverless patterns.
Yeah, definitely. So here's just what I was just talking about a second ago. So here's the repo, actually. I may as well kind of show this. So this is all open source. So you see serverless snippets and AWS samples. And you can see all the snippets that we have are here. And we see we've had many different contributions over the past couple of months. But if we scroll down, the interesting thing, what you're just saying, Julian, is you can have your own custom saved queries in CloudWatch. In CloudWatch logs, and that's exactly what Lars has done. So Lars is a community member. He builds wicked AWS tools and serverless tools. You definitely check him out on the repo here. But literally, I think it was about 2 days after he released this tool here, which was CloudWatch logs insight snippets, and it kind of it will update these automatically and put them into your AWS account, which means you can have all of these snippets that you see on this website and from the community within your AWS account saved. So you can just click on them directly in here to load them in there, which is absolute, it's brilliant. And just think, again, this is what I love about open source stuff is we built this, and then literally 2 days later, he built this, and it's like, wow, okay. It polls it every 12 hours. It can be changed, and check it out if you're interested in that. I think it's brilliant.
I love the breadth and depth of our keen community people who come up with really cool additions to the stuff we build. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And also, don't forget, we are live here on Serverless Office Hours. So please, if you do have any questions, send us via the comments, and we are happy to bring them up. Can be about today or general serverless stuff in general. If we can answer your questions, we'd love to have a chance.
Cool. Excuse me. So snippets. So going back to snippets. So we just looked at CloudWatch logs, and then we had kind of more community members come in and say, can we add kind of different types of snippets and different things here? So an example here is like AWS CLI. And one in particular here that I added that I saw on Twitter, again from our community, is the ability to tail CloudWatch log groups and follow it and format it using JSON, right? And it's kind of the command, if you're not doing this stuff every day, it's the kind of command that you might forget, or you might try and find somewhere else, or you might have stored locally in your terminal or whatever. This is a perfect case, I think, for like snippets, where it's like, okay, if you want to do this particular thing, just have a quick look at this. So all you'd have to do is come here, copy this, replace this log group with your log group name, and then you'll get this kind of format in real time coming back to your terminal. So it gives you just a great way to see CloudWatch log groups as events are happening in them, and you can kind of see them real time in your development environment. Which again, it's just a small win. It's one of these small things that you might be familiar with, or you might not be, but you can kind of come here and kind of look at that. Another part of snippets is something experimenting with and looking at, which is the ability to add code snippets. And what I mean by these are things like, if you wanted to, example here, Amazon S3 trigger to invoke Lambda function. So an example here is this is in Node, and we can display code snippets here where people can kind of copy and paste these things. Now, it'd be good to get some kind of feedback on this if you're watching this, or if you're watching this asynchronously in the future, kind of reach out to us on Twitter, just to see if this kind of thing is interesting or not. Because what it also allows you to do is kind of select the language, right? And when you submit one of these snippets, you can, the process, I've tried to make this kind of process as simple as possible, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But you can add any language, it supports any language, and any kind of file that you want. So when we start thinking about that, it's kind of thinking about, can we have these things kind of be more, are these things useful for engineers? Again, .NET there. Here is just some .NET code to, a Lambda function to, again, S3 or Lambda using .NET. So you can kind of just navigate these and see these. And if you go back, there's a few of them so far, just a couple to give some examples. But they're all kind of written in different languages and support different runtimes here. So it's worth looking at that. And again, if you want to contribute to snippets, you can hit the Submit a Serverless Snippet button here, or go directly to the repo. And the way you submit a snippet is you have a folder, you add a new folder, and then you add 2 items into the folder. You add the snippet data JSON file. So this is actually some configuration that we need in order to render this thing on serverless land.
Dave, can we zoom in a little bit, please?
Oh, sorry, yeah. I know it's probably super tiny. So an example here, the title, description, the services, or the intro box, these are things. There's intro text, GitHub repo, and all of this is documented, which I'll show in a second, and maybe an author picture there of you. And this snippets here is the most interesting part, is because you can kind of render any text, and you can also render any language or multiple snippets in one, and Serverless Land will pick that up and render that. So an example here is we have one snippet, we have snippet.txt, and if we go back, we see snippet.txt is exactly the file, is exactly the query itself. Now, if you make a pull request and add this in, we will pick this up and put it into Serverless Land, and that's it. There's 2 files here, and that's your snippet in. So to add snippets is kind of hopefully relatively simple. If you have any kind of feedback on that, please let us know. If we go down here, we have the README, and the README also kind of say how can you contribute. And if you click this adding snippet guide, it'll walk you through various different ways of how you can add a snippet and go into more details than what I just said there. Another thing you can also do here is having, you can have like instructions in the snippets. So you can say, okay, first install this library. This is the power tools as an example. And then the snippet then continues to go in like this step-by-step process. So this is just an example of using like multi-snippet pages there. And then also we have examples of using different languages here. And it's all based on this snippet data file that we just saw. I'll just quickly give you an example of how that could look if you're interested in adding any integration into Lambda. Here we go. So we've got the snippet data file, which is the one we just saw. And then we have 3 files here. So we have the .NET file, you have a JavaScript file, and we have a Python file. Now, you can add as many files as you want. You can add as many different languages as you want. Serverless Land will just pick this up and render it, and it will know kind of how to render this language for you with the right syntax highlighting. So if we go to the snippet file here, we can see that we've got this API called code tabs. This is Node, and the snippet is the example.js, and we point that and we define the language there. Here, down here, we have Python. Again, we point out the Python file and the language. And then we got .NET, which is the language here, and we pass it the file there. And then again, what Serverless Land will do is kind of process this file, take these files, put it into Serverless Land, and again, render it. So we've had some good, so far we've had some good snippets contributions, which is great. And if you want to add more, or if you kind of think of any more ideas, or think of other things that we can do with snippets, or if it's a good idea, if it's a bad idea, or if you're confused, just let us know.
So just again to reiterate, the difference between the snippet integrations and the serverless patterns is the serverless patterns is actually concentrating more on, for example, Lambda and DynamoDB and what that SAM/CDK/Terraform/serverless framework infrastructure as code file looks like. Yes, the example in that may include some code, but these integrations is more just actually looking at that code. So serverless patterns is about the infrastructure as code. This is the actual code, and then obviously there may be some duplicates across some of the examples, but this would be a quick way which you could read something from DynamoDB, for example. And I suppose that doesn't have to be done from Lambda. This can be done from any Node.js application you need, so it could be applicable beyond your serverless applications if you're using containers or EC2 or anything really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of built as a kind of proof of concept here. So as I said, if people have got ideas or ways to extend this or anything else like that, just let us know. The patterns themselves are kind of everything out the box. So if you want to do S3 to Lambda, you kind of got all these 10 files or whatever else you might need, depending on your deployment method there. Snippets are kind of like very particular small bits of code, right? Small bits of things that you can take, lift and shift into your application. So yeah, have a play. We're kind of looking for contributions and feedback there. So I can kind of go in, if you want to, I can kind of go into other things I'm prototyping with snippets or
Well, Dave,
ideas.
just what is the tools one? We on tenterhooks to see the last the last one.
Yeah. So tools, I just added examples here of different kind of tools that you can add to snippets. So an example here is like, how do you use Power Tools, the logger? So here, this is what I was talking about earlier, is this section here, section 1, section 2 is actually all driven from the snippet file. So you can actually have step-by-step guides or step-by-step install instructions in the snippet, and it will render out on the screen. So an example here is we're saying to install Power Tools with TypeScript. Here, use this line here, install it. And then an example down here is exactly how you can actually use Power Tools in your Lambda function itself. And then at the top, if you want to use .NET, you would do something similar. So we have how to install it, and then again, how to use it down there. Now, if we scale that out to Java or different languages, or we scale it out to different libraries or different things, it could become a place where, again, for tools where, you want to learn something, you want to be familiar with something, come and install it in as many languages or explore this stuff as you want. Another thing you could do with snippets, an example, is you could write small tutorials, right? Which is how do you build something up from the ground up? Okay, how do we build a Lambda function that talks to S3? Okay, step 1, define your handler. Step 2, install this package. Step 3, initiate the package, and things like that. So you can start exploring with these data files here to do various different things. So yeah, that's the
Cool.
tool.
And if anybody's interested, the Lambda Power Tools is just such a must-have to use for building serverless applications. All the observability things like metrics, logs, and tracing has so many, for Python decorators and for TypeScript and .NET and Java, really cool bits of code that you can just automatically add. Takes away so much of the undifferentiated heavy lifting when coding for that. There are also a whole bunch of utilities, so even fetching secrets, fetching parameters, doing JSON serialization. Things from app config, all the different tools have a whole bunch of different stuff. So seriously, if you're doing any development with Lambda, have a look at AWS, look for Power Tools for that specific language, and a whole bunch of shortcuts that are built in. And Cloud Surfer, thanks for your question again. Does Code Whisperer do snippets as well? Interesting. Well, CodeWhisper, if you aren't aware, is an artificial intelligence machine learning service from AWS, and we had them on Serverless Office Hours recently, where because it's integrated in the Lambda console, where you can just write a comment and CodeWhisperer does pulls its back end and does some AI to work out what you're doing from either your code comment or your code, and then just plonks in some S3 code, for example, within your console. I was actually super impressed how well that works. I suppose it does its own snippets is the best way to say it. I don't know if they are starting to mine serverlessland.com snippets for their source code, but they are very particular of the places they do curate and get their machine learning algorithms from. So I wouldn't say they're integrated, but yeah, I suppose Code Whisperer is another way to grab snippets as well.
Cool. So I can kind of show, so this is snippets. So we've got patterns, workflow, snippets. So if you're interested in serverless, you want to learn some more serverless things, or you want to learn patterns, or you want to dive into step functions, or contribute or look at the snippets, I highly recommend going here. I literally, as I said, I'm not saying that because I work here, but I actually literally use this every other day to explore these things and learn things, because we're constantly adding more and more contributions to the website, which is just awesome to see so many people kind of wanting to do that. So I can what I can talk about next, if you want, is just like taking snippets to the next level and show you some kind of prototypes and ideas if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm just going to grab two questions before we do transition. Breadbox, thanks for your question. Is it okay to store a DB URI in Lambda environment variable, or should you use Secrets Manager? So Dave, you feel free to add on as well. Lambda environment variables, I would think, are for things that are not secret. So if you have the DNS location of something, or the name of the database, or how to connect to the database, absolutely fine to put that in a Lambda environment variable. I would use Secrets Manager then for the username and password if you're not using IAM. The reason for that is, although Lambda environment variables are stored encrypted, anyone with access to the AWS account is able to view that within the Lambda console or via the AWS CLI. Hence, they would be able to then see your password and secret. So although it is encrypted within your account, somebody else will be able to see that as well. So that would be my suggestion. One other thing to sort of tease out of that, I suppose, is there are actually two different types of Lambda environment variables if we want to put our really nerdy hats on. One are the sort of Lambda function configuration environment variables. So these environment variables you see in the console, you configure as part of your Lambda function config, but also you can obviously create Lambda function environment variables when it is running. Now, those environment variables, when it is running, are only available within that Lambda execution environment, which are available then for subsequent invokes. But when that Lambda execution environment does spin down, they disappear. So if you did then store that username and password within a Lambda function while it's running as an environment variable, that would be more secure, because if somebody was browsing the console, those environment variables are not visible. So a bit of a nuance there, but I would say, the DNS entry or whatever the URI is you're mentioning, store a database, absolutely fine to store in a Lambda environment variable. The actual secret stuff, use in Secrets Manager or something else. And in fact, there is a serverless pattern. What am I even talking about? There is a serverless pattern for connecting to Secrets Manager, and this actually is written for Node.js to use top-level await. So this is a way that you can much more cleverly use the init state of your Lambda function to be able to read the value from Secrets Manager and to use that in subsequent invocations. So that's using the SDK v3 and top-level await. So it's sort of really good. And obviously the person who submitted that must surely know what they're talking about. So. Oh, what a surprise. Anyway, so.
That's great. Cool.
And then, sorry, yes, wondered, Fubstaru, hopefully I've got your name. Thank you very much for joining us via Twitch. Can Lambda connect to Systems Manager to send a command or a template that will restart or service or a process like auto healing? I don't know 100%, but I can't think why not. AWS Lambda can connect to Systems Manager, and I suppose it can do anything. It would be an SDK call to Systems Manager, and that would be able to do that. So Lambda can certainly do that, or also step functions would be able to do that with the amazing, incredible SDK integrations with step functions. More than 10,000 SDK calls directly from step functions. So if you have a coordinated workflow that needs to do something, don't even need a Lambda function, use step functions. But yes, your question is about Lambda, so I'm pretty confident that that is entirely possible.
And even better, if you manage to get it working, add it to here.
Oh, there we go.
Workflows
There
collection. There we go. Look
There we
forward to the pull request.
Yeah.
Cool. So talking about snippets, something I'm super kind of passionate about in general is just like how do we go from taking these kind of environments where we can kind of learn patterns and snippets and workflows and actually start doing kind of what's next for them, what's the future of like these development environments and these experiences that we kind of learn from online. I kind of dive deep into it every so often. I've got 3 things to kind of quickly showcase to see what people think. And again, I'd love to get some kind of initial feedback or anything anyone has to see if this will be useful on serverless land, because then we can kind of explore and implement and hopefully make people's lives easier. So number 1 is this application that I kind of hacked together. And the idea is it actually uses serverless snippets and contributions, everything, and it makes them embeddable. And what I mean by that is that you could embed a serverless snippet inside your own website. Because what we can use, so service, this, for example, this is using React under the hood, but it kind of can spit out some static HTML that you can just put inside a website if you wanted to. Again, this is just a proof of concept, but an example is you could specify a theme. So when you embed it into your blog or everywhere you want to, you could say, okay, iframe with the URL, which is just on my machine at the moment, but that would be serverless land, could be a serverless land URL. Specify the theme and the line and some configuration like line numbers. And you can start getting these things inside of your blog or wherever you want them. Again, just kind of thinking aloud here. So an example of what it would look like in a blog is exactly this. So you could have your blog content, and then you could import a serverless snippet inside there, and it will come with the editor and everything else that's needed, and kind of have a link back to the snippet if you wanted it. You can change the theme. So I was just experimenting here. So here's an AWS theme that I kind of put together using Tailwind. But again, you can kind of, this particular snippet has Node and .NET, as we looked at earlier, and you can just embed this in and you kind of get this editor, everything else out the box. Again, if you wanted to look at it within context, again, I kind of hacked together this AWS look and feel here, but you could, embed this snippet directly inside of AWS itself and have these snippets kind of live there. Now, why you might want to use this, just some, again, thinking aloud here, but I think a problem you kind of see in blog posts and the internet everywhere is like the snippets kind of get out of date and the code kind of gets out of date. Using a pattern like this, we could, in theory, link off to a code that in the future, if AWS release a new feature or this top level await, for example, when we wanted to use that and move over to that, we could update snippets, and these snippets will be just pushed out into all these different environments and these different places where they're used. Not sure if it's a good idea or not. It's just kind of hacked together. So any kind of feedback or any ideas, just be interested to know there. So this is embedding snippets within your website with themes and just basic iframes, which is great. So that's demo kind of number 1 there. Then as I was kind of diving deeper, I was looking at ways, I'm just kind of running it now, hopefully this works. Looking at ways to, can we have, this looks very magical, but can we have an environment, for example, where we could take snippets, we can take patterns, we can take workflows, can we create an environment where it's teaching us the code? It's diving into more details. And what I mean by that is two things. Number one, using these kind of tools, you can have README files and you can have text that kind of highlight things as we go. For example, this says using an S3 trigger to invoke Lambda. This blueprint provides a sample function. As we highlight the sample function, it highlights the code on the left, right? So again, kind of this contextual highlighting as we're kind of reading documentation that demonstrates how to use Amazon S3, right? So we import S3 at the top. This node example shows how you use the SDK to get objects from S3. So again, we can take our time and we can actually understand what in context, what the example and what the tutorial is actually telling us in the code that we've just seen. This Lambda function can be triggered from S3. So we highlight that. And then we go down, the bucket and key, then use the get object method, and we click on this. Now, the interesting thing here, this is just, again, a prototype, is on the left, we could have all the patterns and all the files, like that whole GitHub experience that we just saw. Click on them and you can kind of see this in context. And the interesting thing here too is like you could package this up in a way that you could have contributions online and contribute into this kind of work and environment. So as a contributor, all you'd need to really know is you'd need a code file and you'd need a markdown file, and that would be it. And this application would be able to map the two, map exactly where the highlights need to be and do things under the hood. Another interesting thing here, again, is just as I'm exploring patterns and learning stuff day to day, I just think it'd be cool to see like similar patterns. So if you're diving deep into S3, into Lambda, what other similar patterns do we recommend? What other similar patterns do you think would you be interested in? So you can kind of dive in deep here and kind of explore things, and that would open up a new environment. Now, the other thing I was looking at, this is a while ago, which was you can use AWS, Amazon Poly actually, to kind of read the markdown files and highlight code as you're listening to the tutorial. So an example of that would be something like this, and hopefully you can kind of hear.
First, we need to import the SDK file.
So the idea here is as you play it,
first we need to import
it kind
the
of
SDK
goes
file.
One by one, and it can kind of stop on the highlights.
The handler and read the S3 event. Now let's get the bucket and key off the event so we can use this to call S3 to get our data.
So if this was kind of more in sync, what would happen there is as he's reading that, is it would highlight the lines as he's going through that tutorial, that listening tutorial, and everything there is actually kind of automatically generated using Poly, and then you can map that code experience to Poly, where you can have these automated experiences where people could just upload. Again, it's like coming back to the developer experience where you upload a file, upload a markdown file, upload a code, and then we can use kind of AWS tech to kind of map this kind of process for you. So that was just something I kind of, again, hacked together, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, this kind of thing, especially in like serverless land, I'm thinking about how, just ideas about how you could make serverless land more intractable and better, that learning experience. How can we get more out of the information that we have and give customers a better experience here? So yeah, any comments, questions, or anything on that, again, let us know. Let's just kind of
Dave, I love it, just quickly hacking around and pulling this amazing stuff together. I think that's fantastic. I don't know what voices Poly can do, but I think it would be hilarious for Jon Snow or Bart Simpson, or I don't know who else, to be reading my serverless snippets to back to me. I think that would make my working life a million times better, I think. So this looks amazing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Train some models and put different voices in there. Put your voice, Julian.
I wonder what I'd be reading out. Yes.
Yeah. And then I think there's one more actually, which kind of, again, very similar to this. Sorry, let me just quickly do this.
Yeah, just while you're bringing it up, of course, one of the highlights of doing this show is when two people watching answer each other's questions. So we did have the questions before. Sorry, just jumping up to the original question from Froobsteroo about connecting to Systems Manager. And Versace Dribs answers going, you can do CloudWatch agent send logs to CloudWatch alert to alert state change, then run the Lambda function and SSM automation run command. So yeah, that yeah. So there's an answer to it as well. We were just looking at the last bit of doing Lambda, but thanks Versace Dribs for answering another question. That is great. Stephen Borg say, I want an EJ voice. Eric Johnson. Oh yeah. That's just a given. That's an absolute given.
Yeah.
That'll be at volume 100 and excitement level 200, which is great. Which is all that Eric can do, and it's great.
Yeah, we need to train the models. We need to get him to, yeah, we need to record him speaking and just train these AI models, and then we can do it. This is kind of like just the last example here. It's very similar to the one we just saw, but can you use like this I can use like this editor here, multi-page editor, to kind of again explore patterns and different ways of doing things. So API gateway to event bridge. As you scroll down here, it's actually, you can see as I'm highlighting it, it's actually changing the tab, right? It's actually highlighting the particular thing, the particular context in which I'm talking about. If I go here and it says highlight the resource, it's talking about the API gateway resource. It kind of fades out and highlights that code, which is pretty nice. Then as you go down into the tutorial, it says allow this put events. We highlight there and you can see it's talking about that. And then we manage a policy. So if we click on highlight manage policy, again, we can see what's happening here. So it's just another way. I don't know. I'm just experimenting, thinking, but let us know if you would find this kind of tutorials or these things useful. I think, I kind of do it because I know I would find them useful, and just to learn in context. So sometimes it's hard to, you have all these kind of things in your tutorial going on. It's kind of like you need to create this resource, you need to do this, and you have a massive SAM template or something like that. I think it might be nicer in tutorials to kind of break things up in small chunks and allow us actually to kind of highlight things and view things as we kind of see. So again, if you want to see more of this, or if you want me to kind of experiment more with this, or kind of get this as a beta on Serverless Land or something, just shout. Again, yeah, give us some kind of use cases and some things we can think about. Anything to kind of make your life easier. Yeah, would be good.
Dave, that's fantastic. Yeah, please send your feedback in. You've got a chance here if you're watching live. Otherwise, please contact Dave or myself either via Twitter. We will have their details again, but you can also see it from our names over there. So Boini123, Dave would really appreciate your feedback. He's done a lot of thinking and a lot of work on this, and with Dave's other projects like his event catalog and things like that, he's at the forefront of thinking about design and serverless and how we can in an educational context, how you can make things even more accessible. So yeah, he's one of the people who really values your feedback, and it would be great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's kind of wrapped us up really nicely, actually. 55 minutes.
Perfect. Well, yeah, so just, the links, don't leave us now yet. Just the links, serverlessland.com/snippets, or if that's too much to think of, s12d.com is our URL shortener, and that's for serverlessland.com, the 12 numbers between the S and the D. So s12d.com snippets, so that's what Dave's been talking about today. And we did talk about before about the workflows connect collections, s12d.com/workflows, so anything to do with step functions, and of course the Serverless Land patterns, which is the infrastructure as code files. And remember, it's not just AWS things. We're loving our Terraform serverless framework along with SAM and CDK. And please, as Dave has mentioned many times, these are all open source. We value your contributions, and we want to make this as broadly accessible to as many people as possible. So don't be shy. Send us your pull requests, and we would absolutely love to help out. Kurosaki has just come back with a question. I understand it's difficult to get right, but SAM has been unusable on Windows, especially if it involves working with Go/Rust. Wonder what people do who have Windows machines. Kurosaki, I have a Windows machine. Your solution if you are having issues with any of the languages, and this is not even a Windows issue, but even it's a Mac or Linux issue, is if you have Docker installed, and it does also work, I believe, with some other container runtime environments, you can actually use SAM local invoke, SAM build, and all the different SAM commands, --use -container. What that actually does is that then downloads a Linux, AWS-based Linux container, and that will do all your Go, all your Rust, even your Node, even your Python, anything. And I find that is super useful when I'm getting stuck on Windows or something's a bit weird. Sometimes you have your local Go environment, your local Python environment is a bit messed up. This is a great way to be able to do that. So --use -container, if I'm thinking correctly. If not, that will be in the documentation. But yeah, that is a super easy way just to have a sort of bubble around everything that you're trying to do in SAM, and makes it a bit more deterministic. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, please get in touch. So that's sort of wrapping it up, and those are our contact details. I'm Julian_Wood, and Dave is Boyne123. Yep, this is Serverless Live Office Hours. We will be live at reInvent as well, so if you are attending over there, it will be super cool to get in touch. And also remember, we've been talking a lot about serverlessland.com today, but yeah, really an awesome landing page for all things to do with serverless. From the blog aggregation, lots of videos, learning paths, different events that are coming up, Serverless Patterns. We will be putting up a page on all the reInvent sessions, which will be coming up shortly, so that'll be easy for you to discover and find things out. So yeah, serverlessland.com, all to do with serverless on AWS. Well, Dave, super appreciate you spending time with us today and taking us through all the various parts of serverless snippets. I'm certainly inspired to go and dig in my bottom drawer and see if I've got any CloudWatch logs, insights, queries that have been hanging around that I haven't submitted yet, to hopefully help your fellow coders. But yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. It's been great. Thanks
Excellent.
very much.
Serverless Office Hours back same time, same place next week. I'm hoping to bring you a cool new feature release that's happened recently, if we can get that all organized. So please join us next week. And until then, enjoy building your serverless application.